When I was 12, my father took me to work with him for the first time. I remember walking down a long corridor in the crematorium, our footsteps echoing of the empty walls. "This is where we say goodbye to those who have passed," he said then. I didn't understand those words until I saw the grief in the eyes of people coming to say farewell to their loved ones. 5 years have passed since then. I thought I knew everything about my father's job, but that night I realized there are things you can't imagine until you face them head on. My father, a healthy and strong man who had seen and experienced much in his long life, returned home from work at 3 in the morning that evening. I didn't recognize him when he stepped through the door. He was as pale as a sheet, his hands slightly trembling as he tried to take off his shoes. His face showed anxiety, and I would even say fear. I wouldn't have been particularly surprised to see him in such a state about 7 years ago, when he had just started this rather specific job. He works at our city's crematorium, and over time he has seen all sorts of things. He's already gotten used to the tears and sorrow of people. In the early days, he often came home almost crying. Then, sitting at the table and downing a shot of vodka, he would recount how he had cremated a child, describing how the relatives behaved in the funeral hall, their faces, their blank stares, and their eyes lowered to the floor, having already cried all the tears they could for years to come. He shared in the loss with the bereaved families, and was most afraid of looking into the special viewing window of the huge furnace that burned the coffins and their occupants. But as they say, a person can get used to any living or working conditions, and my father was no exception. Cremating people became routine for him, like a chef preparing a dish in a restaurant or a mechanic fixing another car. I won't go into how and why he got this job. I'll just say that circumstances led him to it. So, he comes home in the middle of the night. I wasn't asleep yet, so I caught him in this state. "Pops, what happened?" I asked. He just glanced at me briefly and finally taking off his sneakers, silently went to the kitchen. "Everything's fine," he muttered under his breath. "Fine? Dad, I don't look like an idiot, do I? Are there problems at work or something?" My father, realizing he couldn't fool me, replied, "I don't even know if that's what you'd call it." He took a bottle of vodka from the fridge, poured a full shot, and downed it in one gulp, sniffing his sleeve afterward. I want to say that he rarely drank after work lately. Not like in the early days, which I mentioned earlier. My mom and I knew that if he came home and reached for the bottle, something was wrong. That's when Mom woke up, as if sensing something was amiss. "Why are you so late?" she mumbled sleepily and entered the kitchen. He wanted to tell her something, but didn't know where to start. His eyes darted around, and his tongue stumbled. Mom woke up, and seeing Dad in this state, visibly became nervous. "What's wrong with you? You look terrible." Only upon noticing the bottle on the table did Mom finally realize that the issue stemmed from those very work problems. But after hearing everything he had endured that day, it turned out that work problems was quite the understatement. "A woman came to us today," he began. "She had booked in advance by phone. Everything was proper, and today she showed up in person. She was in tears, overwhelmed by grief. Her daughter had died. I didn't delve into the details, apparently due to heart failure, as the director told us. Anyway, it wasn't particularly interesting to me. A beautiful young girl. She had her whole life ahead of her, to grow children, but it seems fate had other plans. The mother of this girl seemed slightly strange to me later. She kept rushing us. She asked how we could speed up the process. We explained that as soon as all the paperwork was resolved, we would proceed. My job is simply to press a button and regulate the temperature. What could I explain to her? I don't make decisions here. Yet she was in such a hurry, wanting to burn her deceased daughter immediately. All I could do was explain to the woman that I'm just an operator and don't make decisions. She even offered money, but a stable salary is more valuable to me than a one-time bonus. So I refused once, refused twice, and on the third time, she looked at me. It made me feel uneasy, honestly, as if I had ruined her entire life. How? Mom asked. I don't even know how to explain. She turned around and left, slamming the door so hard it nearly came off its hinges. I stood there, watching her leave. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Peterson. Peterson is my dad's colleague. He just twirled his finger by his temple and stared at the swinging door. Well, that concluded our encounter with this not-so-pleasant lady. We continued our work. A little later, when we had already forgotten about her, Alexander Ivanovich, our director, came in. So he says all the documents are settled, and they will bring the girl's body in the evening. Well, if they bring it, then good. Let them bring it. But what about the farewell ceremony, the memorial service? Peterson suddenly asked. She said nothing is needed. A burial site has already been chosen. Strange people, aren't they, Christians? Alexander Ivanovich complained. I agreed with him and recounted how she tried to shove money into our pockets. In short, guys, I'll print out the papers now. She's paid for everything already. So, when they bring her in, around 6 to 7 p.m., we'll handle it right away. Agreed. Yes, no problem, I replied, and pressed a button on the control panel, sending another deceased person into the furnace. As the boss said, they brought the coffin with the girl in the evening. It was hard to call it a coffin, just a simple wooden box, knocked together as if from leftover planks somewhere at a sawmill. But well, in 7 years, I've seen worse. Not everyone can afford to burn their dead in beautiful, expensive boxes. It all burns anyway. What's the point of spending more? Good. They delivered the body, and I stood there, noticing a slight stench coming from the coffin. By our rules, we must always check these things, just in case there's someone else inside. They unloaded the coffin, and I approached it, but it was nailed shut. Excuse me, I addressed the woman, but I need to check. I have to open the coffin. There's no way around it. These are the rules. Who knows? Maybe there's another person inside. You can say goodbye to your daughter in the meantime. We've already said goodbye, the woman hastily replied. She was in a rush to dispose of the corpse. It was obvious, as if trying to hide something. That's exactly what it looked like. It was all strange. I already thought so then. But I'm used to not asking questions and doing what's required. The documents were in order. The boss gave the green light. All that remained was to finish the job. In 2 to 3 hours, you can collect your daughter's ashes. Do you have an urn or something? I don't have an urn. In that case, you can buy one from us. You'll have time to do that. Go down the hallway and turn right. There's a small shop. I pointed the way to the woman. She seemed to go, then returned to me. She leaned in quietly and whispered, so no one else could hear. Could you throw the ashes away somewhere, or scatter them somewhere? I'm sorry, but I can't do that, I replied as politely as possible, barely holding back from snapping at her. You bitch, your daughter is dead. Not only did you not bother to buy a decent coffin, not say goodbye, not pray, but now you want to throw the ashes away. Although I usually don't meddle in others' affairs, this all felt abnormal, but as per protocol, the client's wishes are law, and we had to comply. The mom sniffled and headed towards the shop, while Peterson and I carried the coffin to the furnace. We barely found the damn crowbar to open it. We stood there, pulling out nails one by one, and the more the lid opened, the stronger the smell of decomposition became. Is she rotting already, or what? Peterson grumbled. Judging by the smell, yeah, I answered. Finally, getting rid of the last nail, we opened the lid. Indeed, a young girl lay in the coffin. I compared her face with the photo. Yes, it was her. Although the body had started decomposing in some places, her face was still intact. How long has she been lying there, starting to decompose? Peterson mumbled again. The death certificate stated she died yesterday. This can't be. The colleague was surprised. Died yesterday and already stinks. I looked at the girl. Indeed, there were spots on her legs and abdomen, just below the chest, where worms might soon appear. Well, that's none of our business, I told my colleague. Close it. Let's start. Is the furnace heated? Yes, it's blazing. Good. We loaded the wooden box. The furnace door opened, and the coffin slowly moved inside. The door closed, and I went out to smoke calmly. Peterson stayed inside. I stood there, breathing fresh air. Suddenly, he ran out to me and said, "There's something." What? I looked at him, and he seemed terrified. Don't know. Maybe I imagined it, but it sounded like someone was screaming inside the furnace. His words only elicited a smile from me. Peterson, if you brought a bottle with you, you should share, not drink it all by yourself. I laughed. Did you look through the window? No. I came straight to you. You saw yourself that the body was decomposing, lying there. Most likely you imagined something. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's time for all of us to retire, Peterson pondered. It's retirement time for you. You could give any young guy a run for their money. Let's go check what's going on. We approached the furnace, which has a special heat-resistant window for monitoring the process. I opened it and peered inside. The coffin was charred, but there was no fire. Everything was smoking, smoldering, but not burning. A red light on the furnace control panel was flashing. Thankfully, there was an automatic gas shutoff in the furnace. I stood there puzzled, staring at the window, not knowing. How could this be? What's going on? Peterson asked. In all my years of work, I encountered this for the first time. I double-checked everything. I tried turning the furnace on again. Inside, everything hummed, and flames appeared in the viewing window. Strange, Peterson whispered. And what did you expect? Machinery. Sometimes it acts up. Yeah, it worked like clockwork for years, and now it decided to break. Well, coincidences happen. Less than 5 minutes later, the story repeated itself. When we decided to remove the charred coffin and restart the furnace without it, and when it worked perfectly fine, unsettling thoughts crept into my mind. We heated it up well, and the coffin moved inside again. It seemed like everything was ablaze. I didn't move away from the window, making sure nothing went out. The fire consumed the wooden box and reached the decaying body. I noticed the hand twitching. It was extremely difficult to notice, but I did. At first, I thought it was a trick of the eye, but the column of fire inside. What could be seen there? I reassured myself, but when the furnace went out again and the red light on the panel lit up, the burnt face of the girl stared at me through the window. I had just looked away for a second. Peterson wanted something from me. I turned back, and there was her face in that small window. It was so horrifying that I instinctively started crossing myself and nearly fell over. There was something alive in the furnace. I swear to you, it wasn't the deceased girl. Who was it? Wait, you didn't drink on the job, did you? Mom didn't believe him. Even I could hardly grasp what my father was recounting. Are you completely stupid? I don't drink at work at all. Don't you believe me, huh? Go on, Dad. It's fine. There was a real devil staring at me through the window. Cross my heart. Dad went to the hallway and took his phone from his jacket. He stared at me for about a minute, and I managed to take a picture. The photo Dad showed made my hair stand on end. Mom even screamed. I dismissed Photoshop, editing, and the like immediately because Dad and his colleague are absolute novices with their phones, let alone computers. And why would he do that? I had been to Dad's workplace many times and understood that the photo indeed showed that very furnace and his frightened reflection with the phone in hand. Judging by the sequence of photos, there was no doubt. Already understanding that everything was real, we continued listening to Dad's story. "What the hell is that?" Peterson yelled. Immediately after those words, the terrifying face disappeared from the window. There were loud bangs from inside the furnace, powerful blows. Whatever was inside desperately wanted to get out, but the thick walls and equally sturdy door held firm. "Turn it on. Turn on the furnace quickly. Do you hear?" Peterson shouted, while I stood like an idiot, watching the whole nightmare. My brain completely shut down, and I lost control of my actions. That's when Peterson rushed to the control panel and pressed the start button. Inside, it blazed, and an ear-splitting roar erupted. Honestly, I thought I'd crap my pants right there in the machine room. I can't describe in words what it sounded like. You understand. Some kind of train screech mixed with hundreds, if not thousands, of human screams. "Why were you standing there? Why didn't you run like hell?" Mom asked. "I don't know why we were standing there. That's how animal terror works, you see. Or maybe that thing, that evil, took control of us. I don't know. I can't explain it." Dad poured another shot of vodka, downed it, and continued. "Yes, we eventually ran, but not immediately. Something clicked in my head when the viewing window in the furnace shattered. That's when we probably ran. The management was already gone. No one was in the crematorium. Everyone had gone home. We ran out of the machine room and down the corridor. And damn it, something made me look back. That creature was already peeking out from behind the door of that very room." "So, it squeezed out through that tiny window?" I asked. "I have no idea how it got out, but it was standing there, then started following us. We ran to the door, and it was locked. We went to the back entrance. Same story. Peterson was having a panic attack. It felt like he had forgotten how to talk from fear. He was running back and forth in different directions. To be honest, I was in the same state. "What the hell? Who locked the doors? Where are the keys?" I shouted at him. "Keys are in the machine room," he croaked. In short, the best we could think of was to hide in the storeroom. Luckily, it was open. We sat in the dark, barricading the door with everything we could find. I heard it walking down the corridor. Heavy, shuffling steps. It passed by the storeroom, and we breathed a sigh of relief, but it was too early to open the door and run in the other direction. I opened the door, looked around. No one seemed to be there. But as soon as I stepped out of the storeroom, its split-in-half head appeared from around the corner. That's when we bolted with all our might toward the windows. Nobody thought about returning to the machine room, retrieving the keys, and leaving the crematorium. We opened the window and jumped outside. Don't ask why we didn't do that earlier. I told you, my brain just seemed to shut off completely. When we jumped, Peterson somehow sprained his leg. He fell, screaming like a slaughtered pig. What could I do? Leave him? I barely lifted him and dragged him like a wounded soldier. That creature just stared at us from the window. And when I turned around again, about 15 to 20 seconds later, it was gone. When we got a decent distance from the crematorium, when we saw cars on the road and other people, things eased a bit. Took Peterson to the hospital, then called a taxi and came home. "What the hell?" Mom whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. And I had been closely observing Dad's behavior for the last few minutes, which was, shall we say, a bit strange. He kept looking around, as if searching for something with his eyes darting around. Mom, apparently, didn't notice this. She was engrossed in Dad's story. I saw everything. And I also heard a book fall from the shelf in the parents' bedroom, unlike the parents. All the windows were closed, no drafts to speak of. I noticed another oddity when Dad finished the bottle and he and Mom were getting ready for bed, though it was already nearing morning. Dad undressed and went to take a shower. He's the typical guy, threw his clothes and socks in a heap somewhere in the hallway. As I passed by, I noticed movement in that very heap. I looked closer. There were maggots, white corpse maggots. Not many, about 5. I wanted to call Mom, talk to her about Dad, but she was already asleep. Didn't wake her. Tomorrow, I thought, we'll talk about everything with a clear head. If only I had known what would happen tomorrow. Or rather, today. After the parents, I went to my room and went to bed. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, though. I kept thinking about all of this, and the photo Dad showed me wouldn't leave my mind. Eventually, exhaustion from the whole day caught up with me, and I dozed off closer to morning. But it wasn't the alarm or Mom's voice that woke me. I woke up to a horrible smell of burning. I jumped out of bed. The whole apartment was filled with smoke, and flames were licking the hallway. Covering my face with my t-shirt, I ran out of the room and realized the parents' bedroom was fully engulfed in flames. Mom's body was already lifeless and charred, and Dad was nowhere to be found. There were no clothes, no phone, no documents. He vanished into thin air. I ran out of the apartment and called the firefighters. They arrived quickly and put out the fire just as fast. Mom died. I was lucky to escape. Dad disappeared, and I lost my home too. Thankfully, I have a good friend I stayed with temporarily. Mom was buried the day after the fire, in the same cemetery where my father worked nearby. What was that? Where is he now? I have no idea, but I suspect why that woman was in such a hurry to burn the body in the crematorium. There was some unclean force living in the girl's body, and when only ashes were left of her body, that unclean force escaped and took my parents. Although, maybe it's wandering nearby, in my father's body, just waiting for the moment to do something terrible.